guys?
Which one is it? KPSX? Is that the one that's the show one?
I don't know about PowerPoint. You do know that.
So there's like, is it
PSX?
one that's like a project file and one that's the one that like automatically plays. I don't know.
Well, you can always hit play.
And then next year. Yeah, if you do need to turn it up or down, there's volume on there for your videos. On these two here, yeah.
Okay,
It comes through those, so
Right, this one.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the first animator of the year, Mr. Joseph Wallace, who is a wonderful stop-motion director, has started his own puppeteering animation festival, and is doing all other sorts of things on the side. It's impossible to keep up. True inspiration, and I'm very much looking forward to this talk, and I hope you are as well.
Thanks very much, Anna. Hi everyone, thanks very much for coming along. It's a real pleasure to be here speaking to so many people. I don't know how many people are going to be here, so it's really great to see such a good turnout. I think when I was at uni there weren't that many people coming to lectures, so it's good. We're learning stuff. So yeah, I'm going to talk about... So I work as a film and theatre director predominantly, that's kind of my thing. So I go between making stuff for stage and for screen. And I've kind of always been interested in both those things, but I think it was when I was at university actually that I realised that I could do both, and that actually there's not really much difference between the two of them, and it's really just about storytelling for me. So whether I'm making an animation out of toilet tubes and horse manure, or if I'm making a piece of theatre with 100 kids on stage or whatever, it's all about the storytelling and the design and the way that you can engage an audience and entertain people. So I'm going to talk a bit about both, and I'm going to talk about the design process a lot, because I think the kind of aesthetic language of what I do is really important to me. I'm going to give some kind of, not advice, but theories that I have about making work that might be interesting, kind of provocations for you guys who are exploring stuff and testing things out at the moment as part of your degrees or MAs. So yeah, taking risks and the creative process and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to start off talking about kind of inspiration and influences and research and how that kind of plays into the stuff that I do. Because for me, I tend to do quite a lot of writing as well, and looking at lots of art and then kind of dissecting that, pulling things apart and talking about it with people. So I think like uni is a great time for kind of making the most of libraries and YouTube and video essays and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to talk about kind of film and theatre, but a lot of these processes and ideas are kind of relevant whether you're doing fashion and textiles or photography or illustration or whatever. So I suppose for me, these are kind of some of my sort of stop motion influences in terms of the animation that I make. So this is Jiří Trinka, who is a Czech pioneer working in from like the 40s to the 60s, amazing animator. This is a film called The Hand, or Lubuka, which he made kind of at the end of his career, and he spent a lot of time making sort of films for the state in former Czechoslovakia, and it was really difficult because it was all sort of like blocked in by communist politicians, and eventually made this film which is about kind of rising up against the state that he was in, and then he was never allowed to make films again after that. But that's a really great film in terms of kind of metaphor, poetic storytelling and animation. This is a still from Alice by Jan Švankmajer, who's another Czech filmmaker, a surrealist, who's amazing and makes work in ceramics and film and all sorts of stuff, and has a real interest in tactility and textures, which is something that I've kind of taken on in my own work, the exploration of I suppose, materiality on screen. So when you look at something, if you look at, a darn sock like that, you see the textures, and there's like a kind of a catalyst in your mind that you know what that feels like. And if you're watching clay move around on screen, you know what that feels like. So there's a kind of emotional response through what you're seeing. And this is a still from The Street of Crocodiles, by the Quay brothers, and they look at lots of, they're actually American twin brothers, but they look at lots of kind of Eastern European literature that inspires their work. And I think actually through exploring their work, I discovered a lot of interesting things. That opens up this whole world of kind of research. They read Bruno Schultz and all these kind of writers and artists, and their approach to research and inspiration is just inspiring in itself, because whatever you do, whether it's animation or film or whatever you're studying, it's not in a bubble. That medium that you're working in isn't in a bubble. It's completely, surrounded by other art forms, and everything kind of cross-pollinates each other. So it's really good to just look at as much stuff as possible, read loads of books, go and see theatre, go and see opera, see films that are from the kind of weird foreign section in the library that people aren't really looking at that often. And just kind of expose yourself to loads of stuff, and also go and see films that you think you'll hate, go and see theatre that you think you'll hate, go and look at photography exhibitions that you don't like the look of, because even if you see bad stuff, you kind of will pull something out of it that will be useful. Like understanding why something's bad and understanding why you don't like something kind of feeds into your process, and will either like reaffirm for you why you like it is that you do, what you do like, or it'll reaffirm why stuff's bad for you, and why that is, trying to pinpoint like why something's bad and why you don't want to do that. So on that vein, this is kind of some of the other influences for me. It's kind of an old slide that I pulled out of an old presentation, so I don't know how relevant it is now. But there's kind of Magritte and Cartier-Bresson, and this American sculptor called John Frame, and then still from Warhorse, which is the West End production that Handspring Puppet Company did. And actually, I'm not talking about that show in this presentation, but the next show they made after this, I worked on as puppetry associate. So essentially, I wrote an essay about Warhorse and about the use of puppets on stage and their kind of representational quality, that they're not super kind of over-rendered on stage. They're non-literal. They're a representation of a horse on stage. And they started with the very basics of just a guy wandering around with like some leather coming out of his trousers to try and kind of find what the essence of a horse was, and then expanded that and built it up. But they're very non-literal. They're kind of a skeleton. It's more about the way they move, the way they're puppeteered, that is actually incredibly naturalistic and really kind of hits that image home. And I think there's a lot of similarities actually between theatre and animation in that sense, that they're both non-literal mediums. You have the same kind of play with illustration in a way where you can just kind of pull things apart, and you can, in a design sense, you can build the world up from scratch. Like you have total control over how your images look. You don't have to follow codes and conventions of real life or live action filmmaking or documentary. It's completely liberated. So that's what kind of appeals to me about animation and puppetry on stage. And this is kind of embarrassing photo, the beginning of it for me. So this is me at the front with my little Batman rucksack, just making an appearance there. And this was, so I grew up in Bristol, and this is Bristol Vic Young Company at the time, which is basically loads of kids who used to go to the theatre, professional working theatre. It's one of the oldest ones in the country. We used to go and make shows with professional artists, basically. And so I learned a lot about performance and making shows there, and I did that for about 10 years or something. And then eventually kind of stayed on and started then working on the other side and working with kids to make shows. So working with young people, taking their ideas and then devising stuff. So this is kind of like a load of shows that I did, from kind of short, like 2-week summer courses to longer projects where we're devising and writing. The kind of the big impulse there was kind of taking ideas and stories from the kids and then devising it with them, so making it, improvising stuff, working with them, having a writer in the room who'd respond to their ideas. And as a director, I'm kind of taking their, what they're interested in and their play and forming that into a show. So that was like a way of kind of cutting my teeth on, the main stages of Bristol Vic, the kind of, great regional theatre, being able to play with really large-scale stuff and work with kids, which is great, and they're often actually easier than adult actors. And then that kind of culminated with this big show called The Life After, which had like 120 people in it, 100 kids, like 20 adult actors, including this great old lady, and there was an old guy in his 80s, and then a kid who was 8 years old, so this crazy kind of spectrum. And this combined sort of moving scenery and puppetry that I've kind of been playing around with, and performance and song, a lot of different stuff. And it was about death. It was about the kind of story of a kid whose mother was dying, and death personified kind of came to his house to kill his mum, and the kid beat death up and trapped him in a pocket watch. And so after that, there was no death. So it's kind of about a world without death and why we need death. So I'm going to screen a couple of films now. These are kind of, well, the first one is the first proper animated film I ever made. It's 90 seconds long. And I made another one at the time called Showdown at Jericho Valley, and submitted both of these to a competition called Depict, which is like a 90-second film competition in Bristol. If anyone wants to like bash out a short film, send it there, because it's a great kind of platform for having work seen, and that was kind of what really kickstarted my career. Anyway, the other one I made, we made in about 2 days, and this one took me about 3 or 4 weeks, and the other one was accepted, so I was a bit kind of annoyed that I'd spent so much time, and the other one was accepted. The second film is called The Man Who's Afraid of Falling, and this is my graduation film, so this is like the first film, and then the kind of last film of that period in a way, kind of pre-film school and at film school. So I'm skipping loads of stuff, but if you want to see more, that everything, well, mostly everything's on my website. So let's have a look. Okay. Didn't realise that wasn't playing in there. Do I have to drag it? I may have to drag it across the window. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Okay. If anyone has any questions as we go along, just shout out. But I think we'll do some kind of Q&A at the end as well. Oh, I didn't pause it. So, I'm going to show you a couple of kind of. So this is like some of the designs for that film. I think like I did an art foundation before I went and kind of did my degree, and I think that helped. Like the kind of, what I got out of that was taking ideas from my head and getting them on paper. So before I even kind of started doing animation in an educational setting, I was kind of working out how to, I suppose, visualize stuff that was in my head. And this is kind of step one in terms of getting it from my head. Not that it's like pre-formed, but sometimes you're just Googling and you're doodling and you're using like a sketchbook and getting ideas out, and then it would go from there into the puppet. But that's just a kind of sense. I suppose that film's quite graphic. It's not in black and white, but it's quite tonal. So you're really, in terms of storytelling, you're playing with movement and light and focus to kind of tell the story. And I think like a big thing for me in what I do, I'm a big believer in rules in creativity, which might sound a bit weird, but I think, you know, you're making work, you have such a vast canvas, you know, massive blank canvas to work from, and giving yourself rules. I know in kind of school and uni and everything we get loads of rules anyway, but if you give yourself kind of self-imposed rules, they can be incredibly useful. They can actually make you more creative. So if you're making you know, a piece of work, you can say, I'm going to use these techniques, or it's only allowed to be this length, or I'm going to do, you know, these 3 colours or this colour palette. If you start limiting things down, it makes you kind of more creative with what you're doing. So I think you can still be epic, you can still be ambitious with that kind of stuff, but it helps to kind of give yourself these little challenges and these little rules. So with The Man Who's Afraid of Falling, that's some of the design stuff from that. The kind of rules with this film, the challenge in a way was to tell a story that was emotive for an audience, but with incredibly humble and basic means. So it's all made with cardboard and like recycled cereal boxes and Amazon packaging, and it's very kind of painterly. And at the same time, I wanted to push the cinematography, so I knew we were kind of shooting with digital SLRs, and we were going to mix manual camera moves and sort of camera moves that are enhanced on the computer. So these kind of like restrictions in place, and I knew it wanted to be a certain length. So I think those kind of things help in a way. And there's like pages and pages of this kind of stuff, just drawing the same old guy over and over again. And I could never really do a comic book or anything, because I can't draw something that looks the same more than once, to be honest. So even in the storyboard, it kind of changes his look a lot. But eventually, one of these drawings will go, oh yeah, okay, this is good. And you're kind of thinking as well about, especially because there's no dialogue in this, it's all visual storytelling and it's music. So both those films have the same composer, and music's really kind of important for me in terms of telling the story, because the music is a dialogue, really. But with this, you're thinking about colours telling the story, and it's like what I was saying about building the world from the ground up. So this guy kind of aesthetically isn't that useful. He's quite close to the floor anyway. And so what I realised was it was more effective for the character to make him as spindly as possible, and for his head to be as far away from the floor as possible, so he becomes kind of fragile, and you feel this sense of empathy with him even from kind of looking at him. And I mentioned the colour. This is the kind of like rough colour script for the film. So the colour kind of preempts his like mental journey. You go from this very like dark, worried place through a transition into the kind of luscious, more rural area. Although this is a completely different ending where he was riding a bike, which got cut because it was too complicated. And that's kind of some of the storyboards. So that's how I'm planning out in terms of the shots I want and how the audience are going to see things. So I always have this thing in my films. I always want to give the audience a close up of the main character really early on in the film, and I do it on stage as well, so that we see whoever the protagonist is. We can connect with them, and we see their face. I think seeing the eyes of the person that we're supposed to care about through the story is really important, even in a film which is like 4.5 minutes long. So we see him caring for the plants, and hopefully that makes us kind of care about him. But that's kind of working things out. And then, again, iterations, trying different materials, trying the same thing over and over again until you get it right. This is like carving with sort of polystyrene and what is like plastizote, and then making paper mache stuff a technique I got from another filmmaker, and then like car body filler or something, and then finally kind of settling on the right material. So just, I think like if you have the idea, you have the story, test out as many different kind of ways of making that as you can, or shooting that, or whatever you're doing, for what the intention is. It might be a thematic intention, it might be a story, and there's something about, if you want something to look fragile, what materials say fragile to an audience. If you want something to feel robust, then, get some steel or whatever. But I think that those kind of questionings are useful when you're making stuff. And there's some of the kind of sets. They actually turned out like more naturalistic than I wanted them to be in the first place. But this is like all just recycled cardboard, boxes and bits of cereal packets cut up and painted for the floorboards, and so it's like very, very simple. And again, that's part of the challenge, to make everything from cardboard and have this kind of painterly look. So I was looking at Paul Klee and Cézanne, a lot of those kind of old painters to get the kind of feel. Wanted it to look like a painting, really. And then this is a little bit of the shooting, which looks complicated, but it isn't particularly. I mean, you can see here like the back of a kind of detergent box or something, and everything's just held in place with magic arms. So it's not like I'm building a doll's house. I'm just building whatever I need for what the camera's seeing. So you're not making more stuff than you need to. And there's some people, even when I was at uni, who'd make these incredibly detailed sets and loads of stuff, but if it doesn't, tell the story, it's just a nice model. So I think whatever your kind of final outcome is, think about like streamlining that and making that as easy as possible for yourself. Don't make loads of extra stuff that you don't really need unless it's kind of working towards discovering something about the project. And that's kind of a tiny little miniature stuff. So there's different scales. Obviously that's kind of tiny, and then this is a bigger version of that, and there's layers of these kind of cardboard and paper painted sets, and then kind of somehow fitting the camera in around all of that. And I suppose, there's something like exciting about making epic art out of really humble materials. Not that this is epic, but striving for something which is kind of grandiose in terms of storytelling, but with really simple kind of materials. I think that's something that kind of concerns me a lot. So kind of skipping forward now, I went to live in France for just over a year and started a film collective called Caravel Collective. Don't bother Googling it because the website doesn't really exist anymore. I think there's a Facebook page, but anyway. So this is kind of, I did a course called Animation Sans Frontières, which is a production course where we studied in 4 different countries around Europe. I met these guys there and we started our own kind of collective where we were basically working outside of the studio system and making films and kind of playing around and experimenting. It was a bit like going back to film school in the way that we had time to watch films and discuss stuff with each other and make things. And I'm going to show you 2 films from that period. The first one's called La Vue and the second one's called The Doctor's Tale. This one is live action, so I do kind of live action as well as animation. This is a little example of that. The second one is live action mixed with animation, so we're trying to kind of like push mediums together, see how we can tell a story with different kind of techniques. So let's look at this.
Un, deux, trois, quatre, cinq. 10.
So super short science fiction film made in one day, and then this is The Doctor's Tale. So that's that one. So they were kind of super short challenges in a way. We were just kind of playing around with stuff. But I'll just show you a little bit of the process, because even in these kind of short little gaps, I think it's nice to just look at what you can do in a couple of days if you sort of put your mind to it. We were kind of working in teams, so it was a nice way to collaborate. This is for The Doctor's Tale. This is the storyboard that we kind of made as we went along. So these aren't planned in the same kind of way because they're made in such a short space of time. It's like getting together and going, okay, what ideas have we got? What can we play with? What do we want to do? Again, with the rules, with the constraints. Okay, we want to mix live action animation. Cool. How do we do that? Let's try 2D animation because it's quick. Let's go to this cool old medieval city that's along the road. It looks great. We shot there, and then it started getting dark, and we were going, oh no, we can't. We haven't got enough time to come back and shoot tomorrow. So we just kind of went with it, and then eventually the street lights came on and acted like these big sort of film lights. So just played with the lighting and kind of just developed that narrative as we were out there. So we storyboarded as we went along, so that we could then go back and I was doing the editing and the sound while the other 2 guys were animating. So obviously the storyboards, look like crap. They're not at all kind of polished pieces of art. They're super rough, but it doesn't really matter because either they're just for you or they're for a kind of small team, and if they communicate the idea, it's just about the kind of the beats of the story in a way. And then La Vue was a similar kind of situation, even shorter. We had one day, and we'd kind of be making films in our studio, and everyone had been kind of filming like stuff on the walls and in the kitchen, and Max and I just decided to make a kind of sci-fi film and got loads of cables and hung them upside down in the garage and got a kettle and some weird lights and just kind of made a load of stuff. But it's somehow the combination between the sound and the image becomes evocative, and I think like playing with those kind of relationships is really useful. You can kind of create stuff which feels otherworldly in quite an easy way if you kind of identify like the codes and conventions of science fiction or of whatever you're looking at. Okay, now this is kind of up to speed. This is the last two films that I've made. So actually, both of these were kind of made at the end of Caravel, their period in France. And these have been going on the festival circuit for the last year. And then since I've been kind of in London, I've been doing quite a lot of theatre and projection for stage. But I'll show you these two. Natural Disaster is very different to what I've done before. It's more kind of real world, and it's a cutout technique which I've only used once before. And La Forêt Sauvage is a live action puppet film, so it's puppets but it's not animated, it's shot live action rather than frame by frame. And it's also a short.
For fuck's sake!
I'm sorry, Mark, there's really nothing I can do.
It's bullshit. I started this from scratch.
And we're all proud of what you've done.
We don't need government money to keep going.
I wish that were true.
Please, Jeff. We can find a way to keep doing this.
I'm sorry, it's impossible.
We can't just give up on these people.
It's over, Mark. Go home.
Unfucking believable. Short-sighted, heartless bastards. Rachel?
Mark, you're home.
What are you doing? No.
No, just wait a moment. It's
Oh
okay.
my god, I don't believe this. Please no, Rachel.
Mark, it's nothing.
I'm just gonna leave.
Oh, what the fuck?
I'm sorry, Mark.
Mark,
The charity's over.
I'm so sorry. Come here.
Get the fuck away from me. What were you thinking?
I wasn't. It's nothing.
How long? Oh, Christ.
It means nothing. Please, come here, Mark.
I love you. How could you do this to us?
Wait, Mark, please. I can't see the end.
And what about the future?
I'll never stop loving you.
I believe you.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Oh, yeah.
Hi.
You're nice.
Kitty. Oh, Cooey. 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 Oh, hello. Mark.
Get away. Get away.
Mark.
Leave me alone.
Mark.
Leave me alone. Get away from me.
Mark.
Oh, fuck. Orange juice, bread, yogurt. Orange juice, bread, yogurt. Orange juice, bread, yogurt. Bread.
Take our time. Please, Rach.
Paul,
Mark. Hi.
you fucking prick.
Oh!
Oh, God. Security.
There's blood on my baguette. We're challenged in life by these miniature devastations that hit us every once in a while. They hurt, sometimes momentarily, sometimes catastrophically, but eventually they subside.
So those are the last two. So yeah, I mean those two, like in a way, couldn't be different. I'm just kind of playing around with different things. The first one is probably the most like autobiographical film I've made, and the second one is going back to almost the first film that I showed in terms of the kind of textures and the puppets and making stuff out of found objects. That's the one with horse manure and everything else. So I'll show you the sets for that. So Natural Disaster, yeah, it's been going around festivals, and yeah, it's done better than I thought it was going to actually, which is interesting. That's kind of the initial idea that I had a few years before, where you're just kind of getting the first ideas out, and then that develops into the kind of script. So for this, obviously, there's dialogue, which I do in theatre, but I don't often do in film. But that's essentially, beating out the story and the kind of like the inciting incidents. I mean, if you read like screenwriting books, they talk about this kind of stuff, like what's the thing that starts the story. You have, the kind of classic 3-act structure. You have a character in their world, kind of fine, then something happens that changes everything, and they go on a journey, they have to kind of change it back to how it was, but through that they change and the world changes as well. That's kind of what the script looks like, and you're putting that together. And then from that, I'm then kind of working out the storyboard, which is, like, again, super rough. I do sometimes do nice storyboards, but I don't have any examples in this presentation. So yeah, just working out the beats and working out what you want to see, and then kind of, looking back and going, okay, are there too many close-ups? Like, are we getting a full kind of range? Are we setting the scene enough? And then the interesting thing with this is that it's kind of the most real-world film that I've made, and it was set in England, but I was making it in France, so I was using these kind of French magazines to try and recreate something that looked like the UK, so it was a bit of a challenge. And with the voice actors, there's a lot of actors I like working with. These guys were all kind of back in the UK, and so I recorded the voices over Skype. So we basically had headphones on, I was Skyping the actors, they were recording the dialogue into an iPhone, and I was Skyping them direction as they did that. And it kind of sounds fine. The guy did the sound, cleaned it up really nicely, and it worked really well. So it was a nice kind of way to collaborate with people even whilst I was out there. This is kind of some of the inspiration for that film, other than real life. this Ralph Steadman collage. I don't even know if he did that many other collages, but I just really love this one. And the other two are by a guy called Gregory Farmer, I think that's his name, and he had a big exhibition at the Barbican a couple of years ago of these very kind of like delicate paper cutout. They're three-dimensional, so you could look at them from about three different sides and they'd work, and they were these crazy kind of characters. And I'd still like to do something in a way that's more three-dimensional with this kind of thing, but that was kind of where I was starting from. Although, again, it ended up looking more naturalistic than that. I kind of quite like the surreal style that one had. And this is some of the shooting. So it was all shot on layers of glass, basically. So to get the depth, you'd have maybe 2 panes of glass and a background. So you'd be kind of animating something on one layer and then something on another layer and then have a background underneath. And it just gives you a bit more scope for kind of moving things around. And then the software I'm using to shoot all the animations is a software called Dragon Frame by a guy called Jamie Kaleri in America, who's amazing, makes great films himself. And so down the side, I've got the dialogue and all the waveforms, and I've kind of written out what's being said. And even though the lip sync is incredibly simple, it just looks like, Monty Python kind of opening mouths. I can still see what's being said, and I can kind of move the mouth around to get some subtlety. And I think the interesting thing for me with this, and again, another one of those kind of rules or intentions, was can you make something which is emotional with literally just paper? It's just stuff out of magazines, but you're trying to tell a story which hopefully kind of grabs an audience and you feel something for these characters even though they don't really exist in reality at all. And then La Forêt Sauvage, again, completely different kind of set of explorations. It was playing around with materiality. It was a much more, natural disaster was quite planned. La Forêt Sauvage was actually playing with 2 actors from a school in Paris called Le Coq, which is a kind of clowning physical theatre school. They came down to the south of France. We had a kind of play around with ideas and puppets, and we made a couple of characters, and I thought, oh, this looks like a kind of farmer and a businessman, and what story could that be? And then we kind of just built it as we went. So it was very organic, and I was editing it as I went along. The music was done afterwards, but we kind of had some idea about what we wanted, and I always try and bring the composers on board as early as possible, so that whilst I'm sketching ideas, the composers are sketching music, and there's a real kind of dialogue there, so you feed off of each other. And I love doing, I think this is actually the only example, but when I have time, I like doing these really intricate, beautifully laid out Photoshop collages of kind of all the reference and inspiration for projects. So this is kind of what I was looking at for La Forêt Sauvage, and actually when there's no animation even on here, this is I think this is from Great Expectations, maybe from the 50s, and Faust, which is a really old film. There's some Argentinian cinema, some American short films. Roger Ballon, that one and that one are these two. He's an American photographer who's really amazing. There's lots of stuff with kind of people, very poor people in shanty towns in South Africa. So that was kind of some of the inspiration, and then Paul Klee, the painter, made a load of hand puppets. Those were a big inspiration. So yeah, lots of different stuff that was kind of getting me excited about making that. And again, an example of the storyboard. I've got loads of storyboards in here. I didn't realise I had so many. Anyway, they probably all look the same by now, but this is kind of the same kind of thing. I think this is circled in green because of stuff I still haven't shot, maybe. But super simple, and again, scribbling things out when it doesn't work, and like there, I think I reversed the angle or something because it wasn't feeling right with the cinematography. So because I was shooting it, and then I had the computer right here, and we were editing, I could see how it all fit together, and then I go, okay, actually, no, that feels weird with the camera, so let's reshoot that from the other side. And you can tweak, you can keep you can see it build up essentially, which makes it harder in a way to stand back from the final product when you're so in it, but it's helpful for kind of making stuff in a really organic way. And that's how we were shooting. So, I mean, in a way, it's super simple. I've got more lights and stuff now, but we had this kind of table here, which was the foreground with the lovely horse manure, which actually didn't smell that bad, so if you ever need soil, this is a good thing. And then we had little lights and I guess pin spots on kind of areas of interest at the front. And then there was essentially a trough and a mattress where the puppeteers were kneeling, and there was a monitor here so they could see themselves performing. So kind of Jim Henson style, you've got the puppet up here, and you're watching a monitor of your performance. And then there was another kind of deck here at the back, which had the background elements of the house, and sometimes the puppets come up there, and then this kind of painted background. And that's a little bit of kind of the making of it. So this is Kit, the composer, in his studio doing the music later on back in London. Toilet tubes for the heads, again, just found objects, stuff I found on the street. Carved corks. There's obviously a lot of wine in France, so we were using corks quite a lot. We carved the hands out of corks. And then everything's painted. I mean, I guess that happens in a lot of my stuff, painting things. And then I'll finish off really quickly with Outpost. So this is the image that was on the poster, I think, for anyone who saw that. This is the last piece of theatre that I've done. So this is a show. Again, it's the same kind of thing that I was talking about, where you have this opportunity to just build the world from the ground up. This is the first big piece of puppetry that I've directed and designed and contributed to the writing, did drafts of the script. So it's with a company called Green Ginger, who've been going since the 70s, and they kind of asked me in to come and spice things up and kind of direct this for them. And I used lots of animation techniques and also lots of physical theatre techniques. So I mean, it looks like an animation on screen. And I designed the puppets with the artistic director of the company. And then this amazing girl went and built them. And they move incredibly well, so you can really do a lot with them. And you see their whole bodies. And the performers are very present in the piece. I mean, I really think, like, with puppetry, the more you hide the performers, the more you try to hide the performers, the more present they become. If you put people in massive black veils, they just look like this weird, deathly character kind of hanging over it. So they were present, they sung in the piece, they kind of had bits of movement and interactions with the set. And in this, we did a run in, well, I just finished the UK tour. We made it in Norway, I did a Scandinavian tour, and it's just finished the UK tour. But we, the set basically comes apart, everything is animated, so the characters are animated, and the set's animated. This all kind of lifts up when they go underground. I'll show you a picture of that. And again, just so you can see some of the kind of design processes. This is, I mean, basically, I was in France when we started developing this kind of last May, I think. So Chris, who runs Green Ginger, was in Bristol. And I was in France, and we were basically just pinging emails back and forth to each other full of kind of sketches. And we both have very different kind of design styles, so we'd draw over each other's things and cross things out and kind of try and come to a kind of place where both of us were satisfied and things were working. I mean, the costumes, I suppose, yeah, kind of came from me. The faces came more from Chris in the end, just though kind of more expressive with the eyes. But I did a lot of work on the kind of design of the kind of the locations and stuff, and the underground world especially. And then I put a still, oh, that's coming later. But yeah, so again, there's this kind of real eagerness to work things out through drawing. Then it's physicalized. Then you add light. There's so many different elements that you can kind of play with, and you're putting that kind of stuff together. And that's kind of part of the process. It's like getting the puppets made really early on. They're made out of this black plastic kind of material you get inside suitcases and flight cases. And they're carved, they look kind of like they're made from wood and then painted up later. And these are some of the images from the rehearsal process with these crazy little troll creatures that are also in the show. And then that's, when we're going into production, basically kind of working out timings and little details of the sets. So the lighting designer hated me by the end, so I kept wanting smoke and lights to come out of every orifice of the set. So it took him ages kind of wiring that all up. And then again, this is just finishing, kind of showing some of the, I mean, this isn't, I couldn't really find a good example there. There's a lot of moments when there's strong, quite theatrical coloured lighting, but you can see, in a way, this is like very, very early on to the finished thing, how that vision goes through. And there's an interview with Quentin Tarantino actually on YouTube where he's talking about one of the best pieces of advice that he got, which was from Terry Gilliam when he was at a Sundance course. And Terry Gilliam was explaining to him, you don't need to be able to do all these things brilliantly. You need to be able to communicate to people how you want things to be. And I think a lot of what I do, especially in theatre, in animation it's more hands-on and I'm doing everything, but in theatre it's about me communicating to the rest of the team, this is what I want, that scene to feel like. I want these lights glowing and it needs to feel kind of, foreboding and this kind of light. And I think drawing is a way of doing that for me. yeah, so that one, I think it's going to come back on tour next year, so maybe it'll come to London again. I should probably wrap up, but that's me. You can follow and like and all the rest of it on here. And yeah, all the films, well, apart from Natural Disaster and La Forêt Sauvage, everything's on my website, but those two will be going up at Christmas, I think, along with some other stuff probably. But yeah, keep in touch. Do we want to... Thanks very much. Sorry, that was a bit rushed at the end. It was like... has anyone got any questions? Or maybe I've said everything too much.
How did you make the armature for the cat?
The cat, oh god. Well, actually, that, I mean, you can probably see, like, the first film is terribly animated, and it's because it's got a really awful armature, because I didn't know what I was doing at that time. And it was like pre-film school, already reading that many books. So really, if you're making puppets like that, you want to have aluminium armatures, because aluminium wire moves really well. You can kind of it holds its position, or ball and socket, but I don't really use those, they tend to be a bit cumbersome. But that armature was made out of steel wires, it was like an absolute nightmare to animate. You're kind of fighting with the puppet all the time, which is why the animation's so shoddy. And that's what I blame it on anyway. Anything else? Silence. Okay, well, yeah. Which, my favourite film, oh, that I've made? Oh god, I don't know. I think there's something interesting about like making work quickly from having the idea and then finishing something quite soon after. You have this kind of intensity of vision. So you're close to what the initial thought was, and then the final product kind of follows afterwards. I think almost the more time you have, the more hard it is to hold on to what that initial thing is. And I was going to, actually, one of the things I was going to say was, if you're writing ideas down, if you have a crazy dream or you have an idea when you're on the train or whatever, write it down, document it, record it as a voice memo on your phone, whatever, but also add why you like the idea and what you're feeling at the time or where it came from. Like, I saw this painting and I had this idea to make a film, and because of this, and I really liked the lighting or something. Like, add a kind of clause to the idea about why you feel excited about it, because often you can store these things up and you come back to them a year later and you go, well, I don't know, like two women sat in an event, like what was that about? So I think if you kind of, add in the kind of thought behind it, the impulse and why you like it, that's good. But anyway, I think when you make stuff quickly, you sort of feel like it's been more successful somehow than when you make stuff long. So I suppose La Forêt Sauvage is the most recent thing. It's kind of where I'm at the moment. And then the new film I'm working at the moment is kind of an extension of that, but will be longer, will be like 10 or 15 minutes long. So it's kind of the longest animation I've made. Anything else? What did I not really talk much about? Music or... Yep.
The La Forêt Sauvage, there seemed to be a strong element of the second Beckett's like God, hour and a half, nothing happens, but 5 minutes every hour.
Yeah, I mean that. I think to be honest, like a lot of the film and the theatre totally cross-pollinate each other. The film I make tends to be quite theatrical, and the theatre I make tends to be quite cinematic. So Outpost is very much looking at filmic codes and conventions, and there's cuts, and we have a puppet on stage, and suddenly they're just whipped off with the sound effect to go to the next scene. And I think a lot of the film stuff is inspired by either kind of theatrical ways of staging things, or by theatrical practitioners. I think that's kind of exciting to let those sort of feed into each other.
Did you say that would be online?
It'll be online probably kind of next month, end of next month. Christmas present. I don't know.
So actually we were briefly talking about this before the lecture, could you explain a little bit, like, how did it go when you graduated and you did animation and software, and how did that feel?
So if people didn't hear, how did I kind of, how was graduating basically?
Mostly after.
After, okay, well, like getting into doing all this. I don't know. I mean, I was lucky in a way. I did an art foundation, and I took a year out after that when I was kind of making work. I was training with with two theatre companies in Bristol. So I was kind of working with people who were a lot older than me and making professional work, and that was, I don't know, I learned a lot from that, from being in that kind of context. So in a way, going back to uni, I went to uni in at Newport. Well, it doesn't even exist anymore, Newport Film School, but it's gone. And, you know, some of the tutors and stuff were great, but I never really found that many people around me who were particularly sort of motivated into the same stuff as me. So a lot of people who I still collaborate with now are from that kind of early period, or new people I've met. There's not that many people from uni that I particularly work with. But anyway, when I graduated, I was thrilled because I couldn't wait to get out, and I made The Man Who's Really Falling, which was kind of nearly killed me. My appendix burst, and everything was going wrong, so I was like, let's graduate and go on holiday. So that was kind of, I couldn't wait to get out of the educational system and make stuff. And there was a lot of people I wanted to make work with who had their own companies or were doing things. And I think, I mean, like, I've been, well, it's not luck, it's from working hard, but I have applied for funding and stuff, but I tend to just kind of fall into things where people see my stuff. And I think a lot of that is, you know, now you have social media, you have the internet, all that kind of stuff. You can, like, push yourself out there. Like, I mean, it never used to look this kind of professional, but I've kind of got like an image now, this lovely blue colour and some font and stuff, which makes it look like I'm kind of cohesive in some way. And all of that, having a presence online, that's where people go to look for stuff now, you know, like, I mean, people get work from someone just Googling, you know, fashion photographer or whatever, you know, whatever you're doing, they'll kind of look for that. So I think having a presence online is really important, and talking to people all the time. And I was lucky doing the Animation Sans Frontières course. That was in the second year of uni, and I met a lot of people there, and that obviously led on to other things. But yeah, talking to people, getting your work out, and just going to stuff as well, going and seeing things, because you meet people there who are into the same stuff as you. And I mean, networking is difficult, and it's a kind of intimidating word even, but I think, if you love what you do and you talk passionately about it, people like that. And also people like talking about themselves. They go and talk to famous people about themselves and they'll go on for ages. Yeah. I had a little bit, yeah. Actually, the first job I got after graduating was doing hand-drawn animation for the BBC in Wales. On a kind of short film where I was sort of doing animation direction, but it's not. And actually, at the moment, I'm doing hand-drawn animation as well for a theatre project. It's not like my comfort zone at all. I find it difficult to animate hand-drawn. I like reaching in and touching a puppet. I like the kind of sculptural approach of stop-motion animation. And actually, the hand-drawn animation, The Man Who's Really Falling, I didn't even do. I got somebody else. I got like a second-year student to do it because I was too busy. But it worked out really nicely, and I think, I like mixing the two. In The Doctor's Tale as well, there's this kind of like painterly kind of Photoshop animation that the other guy did. I think I like using it. I don't think I'm a great animator at all. I kind of animate just about good enough to kind of tell the stories I want to do, and certainly in 2D animation, I'm just like, don't really know what I'm doing. I just kind of get by to get the images across. But I like directing 2D animators, and it's something that I kind of like using a lot. The graphic quality of 2D attracts me a lot. And I think there's a danger in stop motion that you can get over textural, actually. You can have too much going on. It can be a bit like mad sometimes with lots of objects and textures and things going on. And there's something about 2D which is often a bit more economic and refined. So I think you can borrow from, graphic design and illustration and that kind of economic aesthetic and apply that to stop motion. That's quite useful. Great. Okay, I'll stop blabbering on. If anyone's got any other questions, come and find me after, or tweet me or drop me an email, something like that. Thanks very much for coming along and listening. Good luck with your degrees and NOs and everything else.
Thank you.
So if you're doing grants, use like for start organizations
Did you go too bad?
First year, so animation. Stop motion. How to get to Thanks, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Cheers.
That wasn't meant for you. I noticed that you got inspiration from very yeah, the hands and it's actually part of my station like satire. Wow. I'm looking at that. You get a nice
in theatre as well, like the animation scene which I think you're playing and the puppets were wooden, so they didn't have moving facial expressions. So everyone was done through gesture and body language, and that could transpire into animation. Like, I think you can say stuff through a puppet that you couldn't say as a human. So I think like in Eastern Europe, especially, it's been used as a way to rise up against. Yeah, it was pretty like hard.
Nowadays, before they sort of act out and stuff. It's more personal in that sense. So the next question is like, do you like to qualitize animation in any way? Then? Like your own stuff?
Yeah, I think especially the hand physics has a lot of edge. But certainly his approach to filmmaking is inspiring. And I saw actually one the other day called Czech Legends, which is that the video 5 was another film which I haven't seen before. They're amazing techniques in there, which are again but I think here in the end, Trevor, not a struggle, but Trevor's very just he's a huge soundtrack, really just amazing stuff.
I mean, like, the first ever animation I watched was The Food.
Yeah.
And Breakfast. It's like, at the time, it was like, I was doing my week. This was like my first ever introduction to animation. And as soon as I was watching it, yeah, this is what I'm introduced me to now. One more question. So, what is it about the animals that you liked the most during the whole film?
I think it's the metaphor, really, because he's taken a really complicated subject and he's found visual metaphors better than anything else with words. It's like autobiographical, it's about an artist, it's transposed to a project, there's like cinema that's not been built and showing that it's about a metaphor between the artist and the like handling the force, the expression. So like, metaphor, visual storytelling.
So, thank you for your time.
No worries.
You've been super helpful today. Enjoyed everything. So, thank you very much for coming.
Just going to say thank you.
Yeah,
For the first animation, like that.
Oh, really? It's been like forever since we've had anyone in the talks.
They've been waiting for you.
It was worth the wait. It was worth the wait.
Someone that draws.
We just crawled out from under our desk and went,
Everyone the same year.
yeah.
Same year.
I'll be working a lot.
Yeah. But that is too short.
Now,
Yeah.
students.
Yeah, I think it's that explanation.
You knew I was coming to
There's
see.
help around the lights.
Now I'm very
I do like a lot. Just like my kids with stop motion, it's like more fun to mess with the lights and stuff.
Yeah.
Can't really do that with you. It's a lot harder.
Yeah, I've seen that. I know her one of these. Yeah, there's some good things. And there's some interesting stuff. I've seen there are people that draw in spotlights and have a negative space. And yeah.
I'm not doing anything.
She just really likes all of my lecturers.
She has great taste.
We're all pretty much like 2D,
Yeah, but they'll have like huge seconds of stop motion.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as such beforehand, my foundation was more CGI animation, like to stuff like 740 and Maya, and it's just like moving on to this piece, it's a huge sort of leap. I've always been influenced by 2D animation, mostly. Like, growing up in like the 90s, so it was cartoons. And it's just, that was like the main influence, like coming on to doing animation. And I think like this sort of approach and this course especially it's helping me to become more individual in my approach.
Yeah, it sounds great. I can sit in some of that.
Only the ones acting.
My you should stay away from that time. I mean, it's a fantastic program what you can do in it. Animation wise, it just makes you want to like forget everything.
I find that, yeah, I mean, I try not to do this as possible, because I just can't.
And still, it's still effective.
Yeah.
But you can't really avoid, like digital technology is how you do stuff.
that's great, and it's made stuff a lot quicker. But I think like, I always try and start on paper or making something because you have that. It's just easier. You know, you just kind of. Which is a great video by. It's like a Linda. It's Linda like horses or something. It's like yellow or something. But yeah, there's a guy who runs. If you type in like designing a logo on YouTube, it'll come up. And it's this guy talking about his kind of practice in Portland, Oregon, and he's like a graphic designer, makes logos, and it's just this brilliant little sort of 10-minute piece on about him designing a logo. And he starts off drawing, and he's talking about this stuff around him, and it inspires him. And that's a bit different. But anyway, it's really exciting. I think starting with paper is always like a good way. Because in a way, if you start the computer in Photoshop, it's like it's just fiddly to do anything.
TV paper.
TV paper is great. Yeah, I mean, people say I should use TV papers. I get like just.
I bet.
A
lot of stuff you could like. You fiddle with it a lot, but like it's not like in your face as a Photoshop.
Right.
So I can't do Photoshop because I press a button on the keypad and like everything goes. So
with me, it's like with Photoshop, what I've taught for the last 2 years was to make concepts and our storyboards in Photoshop. Because, especially with animatics as well, because I think CS6 now, it's like, even though, when you've got like timelines and stuff, you're doing a series of.
Can't see it.
Yeah, it's like, it's really animatic to me.
Yeah.
It scares me.
I think they're all good. I mean, I've never. Well, to be honest, in the past I've kind of had to like scan stuff in to make animatics.
Yeah.
I just prefer to kind of, use computers as a tool. Don't use them to kind of generate. Have books around, have stuff printed off, do little drawings. And then kind of.
I mean, for me, when I'm doing anything, like I usually draw out my ideas on my sketches, and then I take like a scanner or a photograph, and then import it into Photoshop and draw over it.
Yeah.
Like white pen, and then it's like I don't want to do like traditional type colouring, like using crayons or like pens and stuff, because I'm afraid I'll ruin something that I made fantastic. And then I bring it into Photoshop, and I'm more sort of comfortable doing that, because then I can experiment with like different things like tones, lighting.
Yeah, I mean, Photoshop looks. I've never used TV Paint, but I think that's, from what I've heard from people in the industry, that's like the best one.
It's like, I like the sketches. So it's a lot easier to pick up the tablet and like position just a really nice pencil tool on it.
Right,
it feels really natural.
Yeah.
Definitely. Good.
Cool, well, nice to meet you all.
Yeah,
And,
nice to meet you.
feel free to like send stuff over if you're working on things. I'd be interested to see what you're all doing.
Stuff we're doing.
I'll scan it.
Oh, what? Are you going to give them online tutorials now? I got this one mic.
Obviously, that house went off being brought in animation. I was thinking more about the one with Jen, with his mother.
Yeah.
Were you like, how involved were you?
Well, there were two directors. We got such a huge cast. There were two of us directors. So it's me and a woman called Miranda. So two directors. There was a dramaturg. There were two assistant writers. There were two assistant directors. It was like a choreographer. It was just loads of people in the beginning, and then they were trailed out. It was just me after my own people. Yeah, I mean it's huge, and it's mad. Like going into a room of 100 people, over 100 kids, and like trying to make something. It was a bit insane. We did have a lot of rehearsals. We had like 16, 60 or something. Like 16 in the morning, 16 in the afternoon. I mean, it's mad, and you just have to find ways of dealing with it. But I mean, it makes me feel more able to do stuff later on. Because even, Outbox is a professional show, or something, 3 actors, so it's just like this is easy. Yeah, completely. It's like kids running around, and you have to. But the thing is, I mean, why people after came out and said, I don't know how you did it. And the thing is, it it was because it was their ideas. Like each of those kids invented their character, they thought about the story, we devised it, so they really invested in it. So they wanted to make it good, and not yours to go like, you know, this is how it's going to be. This is how we want it to feel like. It's in your hands now. Go and like own this show and take it off and make it cool. And I think they did it. Yeah, it's a challenge. You can't do that. Like that was probably about like a year and a half from start to finish because we 2 years ago. So we did it once and we did it again in 2 different theatres. So yeah, we can't do that considerable time.
Did the boy let Death out?
Yeah.
How did he learn that he had to let me do it?
It's online though.
No, that must be filmed somewhere. I didn't know if I'd got a copy. Yeah, he kind of like, it's set in this crazy little like fairy tale village, and he's one of the opening sequences, him on this little bike going through the town and meeting all the characters. It's like something from their television and then you kind of, his mum gets ill and death comes, this huge death puppet, and one of the times I was watching the show, there was this little family in front and the little girl started crying and ran out. It's like terrifying. There's this orchestra on stage playing this horror music. But he beats death up, traps it in a pocket watch that his father left to him, and the world without death obviously doesn't work. Like people being born and not dying, and nothing can kind of grow and develop, and all, just all goes to chaos. And it's actually his sister finds the pocket watch and opens it.
So what if he kept it in there, dead, hidden away on his bed somewhere?
Right,
If his sister hadn't ruined it all.
But he then grabs his mother and they run off into the mountains, and then in the third act he meets a lot of people who've lived without death and now are going to die, and comes to terms with it and lets his mother go in the end. So.
Well, I hope it is filmed.
Yeah, well that's a good point. I don't know. I find it.
Well, thanks.
No
It was a great
worries.
talk.
Nice to meet you. Cheers.
What did you want?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I found the whole thing like cinema which is quite an obvious transition.
Yeah, it's funny. Not people do it. There's a director called Julie Taymor who, in fact, The Lion King, that's in the West End. She directed that. She also directed the feature. She's more known for the things and stuff, but she does both. And then, I just forget his name, was an English director, John. So, that's 32. There's not, it's not that many people. No,
I know, like, when I left high school, I did like a year-long sort of foundation thing at college. It was a creative media course, so it was like really fun. Everything.
Yeah.
It's like the whole course was like art and media and things involved as well.
Right.
And like the whole thing, like experiment.
Yeah.
It's like sort of really taught to me because like also culture. You had to build a set for a theatre out of cardboard, and we had to think like how would it actually function? Like it had to actually function on stage. And like I remember like once where I was cleaning up and accidentally dropped one of the light gels in the water. Like used for like the lighting. And I was like, oh shit. But then I realised like it actually starts crumbling. It actually starts shrinking the mountain. I was like, huh. So like then like I then took that and I like because I was doing the fountain thing in the centre, and I took a piece of green and like dumped it, and then it then actually made the water effect. And it was like,
That's what's exciting. Like the
it's like finding accidental things that
Absolutely.
materials can do.
Yeah. I think you get that with stop motion a lot because it's sculpture and things because you're playing materials and materials don't want to do certain things and they do want to do other stuff. So you can feel like just find these kind of chance discoveries and that becomes
Reminds like a talk that one of the fashion designers like basically saying like fabric is king. It's like the thing that he found most most thing that you found the things failed the most was people trying to make the family do something that just didn't want to do. It's like you have to actually get rid of it. You want to get the material which actually behaves how you want it to. It's about finding it. Still saying that like you constantly got material and you tested them. Tested them in all different ways. Could do notes of it, so like let me move limitations of different families.
Yeah, totally. And I used to remember like in the past, stuff sounds boring, but I mean you do it automatically. And I think seeing like playing material, seeing what they do can lead to ideas. I think that's what's nice to be slightly organic, slightly kind of use for the process.
I think it's like it's sort of like a weird zone like science and arts sort of things together. Because you are essentially doing science, testing materials, artistic something. Anyway, it was very nice presentation, very nice. Yeah, you have a question? Yes, definitely.
Joe, is it okay if I just grab my laptop and I see you in 3 seconds?
Yeah, sure.
There's no plugs in here.
Where are you going from to?
Milton Keynes to. There's one in fact, yeah, there's
from Manchester.
Yeah, I don't mind on Monday or
Lecture to Manchester.
Wednesday. I was thinking.
Was that giving you the right to do that? Just have a check. Cool. You happy with that? Now you've got seats. He's got that. About two. Now, two. You going home? So basically, no, so you just, what is the seat mechanism? Make sure they sit down. And if they ask to see the
some reason they do a 30. No, I got both. This is there and back. This is there and back. Okay, so you're okay, aren't you? Right, and then if you've got any issues, then you can move on now.
Only when you're
That's give him a favour, hold the space on it. 0797 270 anything phone me, Pierce, Aaron. Yeah.
What can you do? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it's good.
It's really nice. Students loved it.
Yeah, they're really good. It's really nice.
Yeah, but I just the animation was
How many are you in each?
it's about 33. Tiny. I will email you guys about the Prezi thing, but I will, yeah.
Prezi.
Yes, yeah. See ya!
Next
Good luck!
time.
Can you, sorry, can you give me those person's names?
Yes, shall I just forward you this email?
Yeah.
That's with you. Should I give you a quick tour before I
Yeah, I'd love to.
put you on the train again?
Yeah. Yeah, it was nice. It's actually nice to kind of like reflect on what you're doing.
Yeah, it forces you to at least create some kind of a line in your work, doesn't it? It was really, like, I love seeing it. Yeah, amazing new stuff.
Weird new stuff.
Weird new stuff, but, you know, I like weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, actually, like, I just want to make this new film. I've been kind of developing it. Actually, the composer's written some music already. I'm just trying to find funding. But the Quay brothers have put me in touch with this producer that they worked with in their first feature film, which is amazing. So
Not bad.
I don't know what's going to come of it, but I'm meeting her before Christmas, so I'm just like fingers crossed that she really likes it. Do you know Simon Pamel? He was like, I've never met him, I just know his work. He sort of made stuff in the 80s, and he did. What's the name of the film? He did this feature film that the first feature film that Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead scored, like Body Song. He works in Amsterdam, but she produces his feature films, so she's pretty like good at getting money for weird experimental stuff.
Good.
I know, but it's like so. I've been trying to for 2 years now find a producer to work with, and I've had no luck whatsoever. Like ideally, I want to find somebody who could work with me to produce the film and theatre stuff that I do.
Yeah.
Someone who's just like, I really love what you're doing. I want to make it happen and get those of you. Thanks very much, man. That's great.
You're welcome.
I can
Cheers.
come back in the office.
Which office?
Mine.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll take that. Should I leave
I
the
can't
card
do
with
anything.
you?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah,
It ran out of space about 10 minutes before the end.
that's what I'm saying. So,
Yeah.
and the cards are only 16 gig,
Oh.
and the whole card is 16
Really?
gig.
Oh, it said it only had 4 gig on the little message it wrote on the screen. It's okay.
I mean, it was definitely empty. I deleted everything off it.
It's no, it's just it's it's a really long lecture, I guess.
Listen, I think
No,
shoots
that had
in-
nothing to do with you. That's just.
I think the quality of shooting in as well is quite high, so it's using
Using
a
loads
lot
of
more
footage.
space. Yeah.
Well, that's fine. Like we can just scale it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Sure, not a problem. Thanks.
No worries.
It's like falling apart on the inside.
I know that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Or a face. Or if you got a face. So like, you know, I tell my haircut, I've still got that length here, got that these parts. It's like, I don't even do it anymore. I just do it outside. It's so much. That's why. Yeah, I'm sorry. Feel bad for you. I like to do stuff like that, and not shave. So like for holding it down, shave. I don't think that's it, but yeah, like don't like wash my beard every day. Yeah. Oh, the worst thing is when you eat like food and you eat it and you twist it and then there's milk in your. Yeah, my sister's don't know Eunice Kabasali or Honey Malay, no, I'm starting work and I want to use them actually. Is there anyone there that I can charge for? Just leave it there. Right.
No. Otherwise, another thing that I always used to do, like people always used to like lie down in rows and then like step on each person's back.
I'm not going to do that in the studio.
But that's not the best thing to do.
Yeah.
I always click my back anyway.
It's a bottle.
No, it's not gonna work.
You get something.